The auditorium at Hudson University buzzed with anticipation. It was a crisp March evening in 2025, and the campus, nestled in upstate New York, was hosting its annual Freedom of Thought lecture series. The event had drawn a mixed crowd. Students in hoodies clutching laptops, local conservatives in red hats, and a smattering of curious townsfolk. Tonight's speaker was Dr. Eleanor Vos, a tenured sociology professor known for her fiery liberal rhetoric and viral op-eds. Her topic? The myth of MAGA, deconstructing a cult of personality. Everyone knew who she'd be targeting: Donald Trump, the sitting U.S. president, freshly re-elected in a landslide the previous November. The room dimmed, and Dr. Vos strode onto the stage, her sharp bob haircut and tailored blazer exuding confidence. At 48, she'd built a reputation as a provocateur, unafraid to skewer sacred cows. Her eyes scanned the crowd, landing briefly on a tall, lanky figure in the third row. Barron Trump, the president's youngest son. At 18, Barron had enrolled at Hudson under a low profile, but word had spread. Towering at 6 feet 7 inches, with his father's piercing eyes and his mother Melania's quiet poise, he was hard to miss. He sat alone, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Vos adjusted her glasses and launched into her lecture. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the golden-haired demagogue in the White House, she began, earning chuckles from the left-leaning students. Donald Trump's presidency is a masterclass in smoke and mirrors. He's a salesman who peddles nostalgia to the desperate, a reality TV star who stumbled into power because Americans love a good circus. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. She clicked her remote, projecting a photo of Trump at a rally, mid-gesticulation. This man, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, has convinced millions that he's their savior. But what's the reality? Tax cuts for billionaires, tweets that read like a toddler's tantrum, and a family dynasty that treats democracy like a game of Monopoly. The laughter grew louder, especially when she zoomed in on Trump's signature squint. I mean, look at him. He's one spray tan away from being a rejected Oompa Loompa. The room erupted, some in applause, others in boos. Barron remained still, his jaw tightening slightly. Vos noticed and smirked. She couldn't resist. Oh, and speaking of the Trump dynasty, she said, pivoting toward Barron's row, we've got a front row seat to the next generation right here. Barron, isn't it? Tell me, do you practice that squint in the mirror? Or does it come naturally? The crowd gasped, then fell silent. All eyes turned to Barron. Dr. Vos leaned forward, her smile sharp as a blade, expecting him to shrink under the spotlight. She'd mocked plenty of students before. Usually they stammered or stormed out. But Barron didn't flinch. He uncrossed his arms, stood slowly, and locked eyes with her. At his full height, he towered over the seated audience, his presence suddenly commanding. Professor, he said, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the tension like a knife. You're right about one thing. My father's a salesman, but he sold America a vision you'll never understand, because you're too busy selling resentment. The room froze. Vos blinked, caught off guard. Barron wasn't done, and what he said next would leave everyone speechless. The auditorium at Hudson University hung in a stunned silence, the air thick with anticipation. Dr. Eleanor Vos, still gripping her remote, stared at Barron Trump as his words echoed through the room. He sold America a vision you'll never understand, because you're too busy selling resentment. Her smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. She'd expected a flustered teenager, not this poised, deliberate response. The crowd leaned forward, phones discreetly recording, sensing a viral moment brewing. Barron didn't sit. He stood tall, his navy blazer slightly wrinkled from the lecture's first hour, his gaze unwavering. You call my father a salesman like it's an insult, he continued, his voice calm but firm, carrying the faintest trace of his mother's Slovenian cadence. But let's talk about what he sold. Jobs came back, millions of them. Borders got secure. People felt heard, not lectured. You might not like his style, but results? They don't lie. Voss recovered quickly, crossing her arms. Results? She shot back, her tone sharp. You mean tax breaks for the rich while wages stagnate? A border wall that's more symbol than substance? Your father's vision is a fantasy for people too lazy to fact-check. She turned to the audience, playing to her bass. This is what I mean, a cult of personality. Even his own son parrots the talking points. A few students clapped, but the energy had shifted. Barron's presence, quiet, unyielding, drew attention like a magnet. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words, then spoke again. You're a professor, right? Sociology. You study people. So tell me, why do you think half the country voted for him? Twice? Are they all just stupid? Deluded? Or maybe, just maybe, they see something you don't? The question hung there, simple but piercing. Voss opened her mouth, then hesitated. She wasn't used to being challenged like this, not by an 18-year-old freshman. They're misled, she said finally, her voice tighter. Seduced by charisma and fear-mongering. It's textbook populism. Or, Barron countered, stepping forward into the aisle, they're tired of being talked down to, tired of elites, people like you, telling them their lives don't matter unless they fit your theories. My father's not perfect. He's loud, he's brash, he's him. But he doesn't pretend to be anything else. Can you say the same? The room buzzed. A few conservative students cheered. Others whispered furiously. Voss's face reddened. She'd walked into this expecting to dismantle Trump's legacy, not debate his son. I don't pretend, she snapped. I educate. I expose. And frankly, Barron, I'm surprised you're defending him so fiercely. Most kids your age rebel against their parents, not recite their campaign slogans. That landed a laugh from her supporters, but Barron didn't blink. Rebel? He said, almost amused. I'm not here to rebel or obey. I'm here to think. You invited me to speak when you called me out. So I'm speaking. And here's the thing, you mock him, you mock me, fine. But you're mocking millions of people who don't have a stage to answer back. That's not education. That's cowardice. The word hit like a thunderclap. Voss's eyes widened, her composure cracking. The audience erupted, half in gasps, half in applause. She raised a hand to quiet them, but Barron wasn't finished. He took another step, his voice dropping lower, more personal. You want to know what I see in him? Not a cult leader, a fighter. And I learned that from watching, not parroting. The room was electric. Voss had lost control and Barron had just begun. The Hudson University auditorium crackled with tension, the air alive with murmurs and the faint hum of phone cameras. Dr. Eleanor Voss stood on the stage, her hands clenched around the podium's edge, her sharp eyes locked on Barron Trump. His last word, cowardice, still reverberated, a verbal grenade that had blown apart her carefully curated lecture. The crowd was split. Liberal students squirmed, conservatives grinned, and the neutrals watched, wide-eyed, as the 18-year-old freshman held his ground. Voss forced a tight smile, regaining her footing. Well, Barron, she said, her voice laced with condescension. That's quite a speech. I didn't realize we'd invited a junior campaign manager tonight. She paused for effect, letting the laughter ripple through her supporters. But let's not kid ourselves. Your father's fighting is bluster. Empty promises wrapped in a flag. He's a con man who thrives on division. You're young. I get it. Loyalty's sweet. But facts don't care about your feelings. Barron didn't react to the jab. He stood in the aisle, hands in his pockets, his height making him an imposing figure despite his youth. Facts, he repeated, nodding slowly. Okay, let's do facts. Unemployment hit record lows under him, especially for minorities. Manufacturing jobs came back to states you probably fly over. He took on China when everyone else was too scared to lose their trade deals. You can hate his tweets, his hair, whatever, but those aren't feelings. Those are numbers. The room stirred. A few students pulled out their phones, likely Googling to argue back. Voss waved a hand dismissively. Cherry-picking stats doesn't change the bigger picture. Inequality's worse. Climate's ignored. He's a wrecking ball, not a builder. And let's not forget January 6th. His fighters nearly tore democracy apart. Barron's eyes narrowed slightly, the first hint of emotion breaking through his calm. January 6th was a mess, he said, his voice quieter but harder. No one's denying that. But you act like he planned it from a war room. He told people to go home. You just don't mention that part because it doesn't fit your story. And democracy is still here, stronger, maybe because people saw what happens when you push too far. Voss scoffed, turning to the audience. See, this is the Trump playbook. Deflect, rewrite, repeat. I'd expect better from a Hudson student, but I guess legacy admissions come with baggage. The dig at his enrollment status, rumored to be a favor from a Trump-friendly donor, drew gasps and a few cheers. She thought she'd landed a blow. But Barron smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips. Legacy, he said. Maybe. But I'm here same as you. Difference is, I don't need a podium to feel big. You're right about one thing, though. I'm young. I've got time to learn. Question is, do you? Because you've been up there an hour, and all I've heard is hate dressed up as analysis. The crowd exploded. Shouts of burn mingled with boos. Voss's face flushed, her academic armor cracking. She pointed at him, voice rising. You don't get to lecture me, kid. I've spent decades studying systems, power, people, and I've spent my life watching one man take on the world. Barron cut in, his tone steady but piercing. Not from a textbook, from the front lines. You call it a cult. I call it grit. You don't have to like it, but you can't ignore it. The room tilted. Voss was losing, and she knew it. Barron turned, as if to sit, then paused, delivering one last line that would echo beyond the walls. You mocked him. That's your right. But don't expect me to clap. The Hudson University auditorium was a powder keg, and Barron Trump had just lit the fuse. His final words. You mocked him. That's your right. But don't expect me to clap. Hung in the air. A quiet defiance that landed louder than any shout. Dr. Eleanor Voss stood frozen at the podium, her knuckles white. Her carefully rehearsed lecture derailed by an 18-year-old who'd turned her stage into his. The crowd was a mess of noise. Cheers clashing with jeers, students arguing in the aisles, phones thrust upward capturing every second. Voss cleared her throat, forcing her voice to steady. Well, she said, adjusting her glasses with a trembling hand. It seems we've veered off topic. Let's return to the lecture. But it was too late. The room wasn't hers anymore. A conservative student in a MAGA hat stood up, yelling, Tell her, Barron, a liberal countered. Sit down, trust fund baby. Chaos erupted, and the moderator, a wiry grad student named Tim, rushed to the mic, pleading for calm. No one listened. Barron, still standing, glanced around, his expression unreadable. He didn't revel in the uproar. He didn't shrink from it either. He just watched like a general surveying a battlefield he hadn't meant to ignite. Voss seized the moment, pointing at him again. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she snapped, her voice rising over the din. The Trump effect, disruption, not discourse. You're proving my point, Barron. Your father's legacy is division. He turned back to her, unfazed. Division was here before him, he said, loud enough to cut through the noise. You just blame him because he's an easy target. But look around, this isn't his fault. It's yours. You poked the bear, Professor. Don't cry when it roars. The crowd roared louder. Voss's face twisted. Anger, embarrassment, disbelief. She'd spent years dismantling opponents in academic journals and cable news debates. But this was different. This was raw, unscripted, and slipping from her grasp. You're out of line, she hissed. This is my lecture. Then act like it, Barron shot back. Teach something. Don't just preach. He sat down then, crossing his arms, signaling he was done. But the damage was done. The room was a wildfire, and social media was already ablaze. Clips of the exchange, tagged #Barron versus Voss, racked up thousands of views within minutes. Trump's kid just owned a lib professor, one ex-post crowed. Arrogant elite shut down by freshmen, said another. Voss tried to pivot, clicking through slides on income inequality, but the audience was lost. Students whispered, texted, argued. Tim, the moderator, finally called a break, ushering Voss off stage as she muttered about disrespect and entitlement. Backstage, she slumped into a chair, her TA handing her a water bottle. "He's just a kid," she said, more to herself than anyone. "How did he do that?" Meanwhile, Barron slipped out a side exit, avoiding the mob forming in the lobby. He pulled up his hoodie, his breath fogging in the March chill. His phone buzzed, texts from friends, a missed call from Melania. He ignored them, walking toward the dorms. He hadn't come to fight, he'd come to listen. But Voss had made it personal, and he wasn't built to back down. By morning, the story was everywhere: CNN, Fox, TikTok. Pundits debated. Was Barron a spoiled brat or a rising star? Voss penned a scathing blog post, calling him a product of privilege. But the viral clip told a different tale. One America couldn't stop watching. Meanwhile, Barron slipped out a side exit, avoiding the mob forming in the lobby. He pulled up his hoodie, his breath fogging in the March chill. His phone buzzed, texts from friends, a missed call from Melania. He ignored them, walking toward the dorms. He hadn't come to fight, he'd come to listen. But Voss had made it personal, and he wasn't built to back down. By morning, the story was everywhere: CNN, Fox, TikTok. Pundits debated. Was Barron a spoiled brat or a rising star? Voss penned a scathing blog post, calling him a product of privilege. But the viral clip told a different tale. One America couldn't stop watching. The morning after the Hudson University showdown, America woke up to a firestorm. Barron Trump's clash with Dr. Eleanor Voss had gone supernova. Clips of his calm, cutting responses racked up millions of views, trending under #BarronSpeaks. Cable news ran the footage on loop. Fox hailed him as the next Trump titan. CNN decried dynastic arrogance. And TikTok turned his "don't expect me to clap" line into a meme with remixes and dance challenges. By noon on March 18, 2025, the nation was split again over a Trump. Barron, meanwhile, stayed quiet. He skipped his 9 a.m. econ class, opting for coffee in his dorm's common room, scrolling X on his phone. The takes were relentless. Kids got guts. Entitled punk. Voss got what she deserved. He sipped his black coffee, unfazed. He hadn't planned to steal the show. He just reacted. But growing up Trump meant never staying small, whether he liked it or not. At the White House, Donald Trump caught wind of it during his morning briefing. "Barron did what?" he barked, grinning as an aide played the clip. "That's my boy. Smart, tough. Better hair than me, too." He fired off a tweet. Proud of Barron taking on the woke professor. She messed with the wrong family. #Trump2025. The MAGA base ate it up, flooding replies with eagle emojis and lib tears. Melania, calling Barron later, was softer. "You didn't have to, Moj Sin. But you did well." Dr. Voss, holed up in her office, wasn't conceding defeat. Her blog post, "The Trump Heir and the Death of Civility," went live by midday, painting Barron as a spoiled bully hiding behind his father's shadow. "This is what privilege looks like," she wrote. An 18-year-old silencing discourse with bravado. Her supporters rallied, trending #Voss was right, but the backlash was brutal. Ex-users dug into her past. Old tweets mocking rural voters, a leaked email calling students sheep, and her moral high ground crumbled. On campus, the fallout was immediate. Protests erupted. Conservatives chanted, "Free speech," outside the sociology building, while liberals demanded Barron's expulsion for disrupting academic integrity. The university, caught in the crossfire, issued a tepid statement about valuing dialogue. Voss canceled her next lecture, citing safety concerns, though whispers said she couldn't face the room again. By evening, Barron emerged. He posted a single X message. No bravado, just reflection. "I went to listen, not fight." But I won't sit quiet when my family's attacked. Thanks for the support. Let's move on. It was poised, measured, and some said presidential. Pundits speculated. Was this the start of a political career? At 18, he'd already outshone seasoned debaters.